You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, the LaMartina Halloween Special. That's right, we're talking to Chris and Melissa LaMartina. And in part one of our discussion, we talked to Melissa about her alter ego, Aurora Gorealis, about horror hosting, writing for video games, including her recent release, Amanda the Adventurer, directing horror movies, the WNUF Halloween Special, and more. Here we go.
The horror host like 3 days out of the week.
That's just not your wake up face.
No, man, so much work.
No.
There you go.
Yeah.
Melissa, do you have this down to a science, getting in character, emotionally, makeup?
Oh, yeah. So I've gotten it down to where I would, redo my eye makeup like 3 times before I was like, that looks fine. And now it's like I'm down to like 45 minutes. I'm ready. I don't even know what to do with myself, because I allow myself so much time.
What's the fastest you've had to do it?
Probably like half an hour.
Okay.
20 minutes? Okay.
It's kind of a formula now, good and bad, because it's fun to play around. But I feel like once you kind of find a look, you want to stick with it so it's recognizable.
And do you start with like the numbers, like the paint by numbers?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it sort of is like that. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, this first, and then draw these shapes, and then outline them,
But you guys know how it is.
Yeah, that's the how it is. My full face of makeup. Absolutely.
Should we dig into that or should we wait?
Let's set up exactly who we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
Great, let's do that.
Yes.
Fan2Fan Podcast, where you catch up at your own.
Great. Want to be like one of those shitty rewrites of a movie where you start with this insane scene, like, how did I get
Yeah.
here? I bet you're wondering.
Yeah.
Because if anyone's listening, they're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of the hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With us today.
Oh, wait, shit, this is the Fan2Fan Podcast?
This is the Fan2Fan Podcast. It is.
I'm on the wrong. I'm sorry.
I'm other glasses.
You just heard Pete Charbonneau, co-host. He's here today with Josh Pruitt, Fan2Fan All-Star. Josh, you've been around for a number of episodes. The people that we're really highlighting today, the LaMartinas, Melissa and Chris. Chris, you're coming back second time around, so obviously you must have great taste. And Melissa, thank you for believing in Chris that you were in good hands, because we like to have fun conversations. Chris was great, so we're glad that you're joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
It's good to be back.
My formal little intro. Chris, we'll start with you. Folks can find you we're really pointing people to WNUF.bigcartel.com. You can go to Chris LaMartina online and find him behind Call Girl of Cthulhu, the clickbait horror anthology, What Happens Next Will Scare You. I don't want to forget 2011's Witch's Brew, where folks on legitimate websites like Letterboxd said things like, everyone in this movie acted like they were in a porn, and I enjoyed it. The 2013 WNUF Halloween Special, listed as one of the 9 best Halloween-themed movies to watch this season. And Chris, you're in good company. Ghost Watch, John Carpenter's original Halloween. You're also in there with Terrifier, Hell House LLC, a little favorite of mine, Trick or Treat. So good group picture there. Also behind the Out There Halloween mega tape with co-producer star Melissa LaMartina. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what we call a transition, because also we have Melissa LaMartina, also known as Aurora Gorealis, macabre mistress of ceremonies for the Shocktail Hour. I think that's probably appropriate.
Woohoo!
Folks can find Aurora/Melissa at shocktailhour.com or at Aurora Gorealis online. She's a writer recently behind Amanda the Adventurer, a video game that's available on Nintendo Switch. So congratulations, Melissa. Awesome work.
It's freaky as hell. I have questions about that one too.
Okay, there we go. Melissa hosted the 24th annual Blobfest, horror host of the recent Terror Vision Cannibal Campout, John McBride and Tom Fisher. So that's an awesome thing, especially when we're going to get into horror hosting. And last time we talked with Chris, we covered, a little serious here, we covered being creative, world building, like making use of the time you have, glory holes, old porno mags, but not in a creepy way, healthcare, sharing all your neuroses, childhood trauma, and other fun topics. So that's what you're getting into. I think it wasn't, hopefully it wasn't uncomfortable, Chris. I think we had like a legit, real conversation. I hope you enjoyed it.
It's great.
So I think, Pete, get it started, because I think we all have a lot of questions. We get to do this all over again with Chris, and now joined by Melissa, and then now you're here too.
Well, I mean, wow, we can go in any different direction. I was privileged enough to finally see the WNUF Halloween Special the other night, and wow, what an absolute pleasure that was. It brought so many memories of my own local TV and just watching experiences. Like the whole thing was brilliant. So I have to say, first of all, congratulations on just the fact that exists. I was just laughing hysterically. What an experience. I can't wait to watch it again. So I think we'll probably delve back into WNUF stuff, but we had started at the top before Bernie went into his 5-hour introduction, talking about Melissa. And
it's like Winds of War, Pete, or like Salem's Lot. Sometimes it takes 4 hours. Okay.
Salem's Lot. That's a good. It
reference. Takes what it takes.
That's right.
But Melissa, is it fair to call Aurora Gorealis your alter ego, or is that just more like an extension of this is just your need to be out there and perform and to be a gateway to some really shitty, horrible movies that you like other people to experience?
I think it's fair to call her an alter ego. I mean, especially when I maintained Shocktail Hour during the height of the pandemic, it really became another side of my personality. You know, we were doing monthly shows where we were streaming and showing movies, although we learned Facebook has some really smart little robots that know what you're showing right away. So don't try to show an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Because they'll nip that in the bud. And then on Sundays, every Sunday, I would get in full Aurora drag and do Aurora's bedtime stories and just spend an hour to 2 hours just reading to people. So it became for me too, I think, something really important because I had so many people messaging me and saying, this is really getting us through and it's really wonderful that you're doing this. And I was just kind of like, honestly, this is kind of keeping me tethered too, because it's it's just something that it really was like to your point about just like having a gateway and staying creative, but it gave me an ability to slip on this whole other personality, even though we weren't having any contact with anyone. It was a nice little escape even for me,
Melissa, can you tell everybody at home about Aurora's personality and whether or not she predates Shocktail, or was Shocktail built around her? What was kind of the origins of that?
I had always wanted to do a horror hosting program, just because I find that fascinating, having someone who is a guide through often not great movies and kind of makes that more palatable. But then also a way to introduce people to movies that I do genuinely love. Like one of the movies that I showed at Shocktail Hour was The Undertaker and His Pals.
Ladies and gentlemen, as producer of this film, I would like to make the following statement. This motion picture is a vicious expose of a part of the young generation, that sick generation who must ravage and plunder for their kicks. Scenes of such brutal honesty will be shown on this screen that we strongly recommend that impressionable young people, or those people of any age, who are upset or affected by scalpel slashing, arm twisting, axe hacking motorcycle maniacs, now close their eyes for the remainder of this coming attraction, and further recommend these people do not attend any showing of this film. Thank you.
I genuinely love that movie. It's absolutely insane. Like it's a bonkers movie that not a lot of people have seen, but you're not just going to like show it at your house. You kind of need that frame of like, we're a bunch of adults like drawing dicks in a coloring contest and we're going to watch this weird movie, I think the central theme of Shocktail Hour is people drawing dicks for the drawing contest. But Shocktail Hour and Aurora were developed hand in hand. So I'd always wanted to do a horror hosting program. Spoke to a friend of mine who owns a restaurant in Baltimore, and she said, do it here. And so I just started trying to think about what kind of personality I wanted to explore there. And it came down to Aurora Gorealis or another character, Betty Batwings, more of sort of like a haunted, spooky homemaker kind of character. But I wanted to play around with this undead dame kind of character who is sort of a timeless, femme fatale kind of character, a little bit snarky, but always has her heart in the right place kind of thing. And
when you say in the right place, like a jar?
Exactly.
Okay.
You guys have been working together for a while.
Yeah, I got it.
There are a lot more opportunities, too, to just wear a lot of sequins and things with that instead of an apron with Betty.
Heck yeah.
That was a driving force, was really the number of sequins that I could wear.
That's always a great guide. That's a great guiding light to have, sequins numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, did you have the name Aurora Gorealis first, or did you have the idea that you wanted to do the horror host?
The idea first. So the name really came out of just the two of us riffing on, any envelope we could find of like what name comes to me, and just the kind of the way we name anything as far as like movies and other projects, just write a whole list of things that are really terrible until you find the one thing that isn't,
That's how you get the good stuff. A stack of terrible.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
My buddy and I took a stab at writing a screenplay one time called Shark versus Seal. Seal is in a Navy SEAL. And it's basically like it's like a Steven Seagal, over the top. And like we were the most fun part of it was just coming up with the names. And we just got more and more ridiculous. And I think one that we settled on was Codpiece Marinara, which makes no sense. But like that was, we're like, this is too good. We'll just leave it in there and we won't explain it. So like just making enough names is
Definitely not something I would ever order. God. I love the Codpiece.
Oh, we're out of that. I'm sorry. It's the very popular dish.
Popular this evening.
I'll say statement and question. Statement. The Asylum already licensed that, Pete, literally as you were talking in real time. So that will be in a red box near you. But I was going to ask you, Melissa, because you brought up the idea of like facilitating a bad horror movie. What was your experience with horror movies before?
Yeah. So my experience with horror movies really began with, I was fortunate to grow up when we still had local video stores. And so we had this one that was like all wood paneling. It was really small. And then they had the little like horror section that was like kind of hidden from all the family stuff. And I'd walk around and I would just like play with the DVD covers that had like the blood in between like the layers, and just like, I just loved like how salacious all the covers were. And the covers were always better than the movies, of course. It's like you look at the cover of like the Ice Cream Man, which was one that my friend and I rented when we were kids, because we were like, this looks insane. And then it is insane, but it's like nowhere near as like scary or terrifying as the cover insinuates it's going to be. But when I was growing up, one particular girlfriend of mine and I, we would get together religiously and just try to find like the craziest movies that we could find to show each other. And usually they were like along the same lines as like the Ice Cream Man or like The Dentist. That's a movie, right?
Oh, yeah.
I had a beautiful wife. I had a beautiful home. We had a perfect life together.
Hi there. How you doing today, Jody?
Fine.
Is this your first trip to the dentist? Good.
But underneath that clean, white surface, there was the stench of decay. Once the decay gets started, it can only lead to rot, filth, corruption.
Hey, you hear it all the time. Every dentist has a screamer or two for a patient.
Yeah. So like I really more of that like fun horror, but like when I was a little kid, like when I have a very different like horror upbringing than Chris, where like his parents were just kind of like, watch whatever. My parents, I don't know why, they felt a really strong need to like discuss like the difference between fantasy and reality with me when I was a child. So like when Beetlejuice came out when I was a kid, because when did that come out? Like
88?
Yeah. So I was like 8 years old. And so like they sat my brother and me down, and he's 18 months younger than me. And they were like, okay, we're going to let you watch this movie, but we need to talk about like what's real and what's not real. And I'm just like, give me some fucking credit, man. Like, so it's like, it's kind of wild that I'm not like more neurotic than I am, like having that, like my parents just so serious about, Beetlejuice.
See, that's what's so fun. My parents did not give a shit.
Yeah.
Big surprise.
But like when Melissa brings that up, I'm the youngest of three and I'm an accident. So like literally by the time I came around, they were like, oh, the good couch no one sits on. Dad slept on that like 3 nights a week. Yeah. But the one thing my mom always cared about was like, she didn't care about violence, decapitations, dismember, none of that stuff mattered.
About a pair of titties.
You can't watch that.
Nope.
The line must be drawn here.
My parents, they had me when they were 23. And I think like for a while, they kind of like maintained this feeling of like, what the fuck are we doing? Like through most of my childhood. Maybe even now. I don't know. I should ask you. You guys have a handle on this parenting thing yet?
You're checking back in.
43 years later, how we doing? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well, speaking of origins, so I want to know a little bit about how you both met. Like my assumption, and please correct me, is it Call Girl? or does it predate that? And like what? So that's what it was. That's when you guys were.
Yeah. So
Depends on how long you were actually looking at my Facebook.
probably like 6 months. That's not that weird. So, I knew Melissa because she was kind of involved with, she was really involved with Baltimore Rock Opera Society, and I'd seen her like at some things like that's a really cute girl. I remember one like Halloween event where I saw her in a Pokemon costume. We were in the Team Rocket.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway,
I made an enormous wig out of like foam and stuff. Yeah, for that one. Anyway,
so when we were casting Call Girl of Cthulhu, we were raising money on Kickstarter to make that movie. We posted about it, and our friend Marla, our costume designer on the movie, she posted about it, and Melissa was like, "Oh, has this been cast yet?" You were interested in auditioning, and before the audition, we had a burlesque fundraiser, like a competition / like variety show to raise money for the movie.
Nice.
Oh yeah, so Marla and I were friends. We had been doing burlesque together. She encouraged me to audition for it because I've been doing theater. I've been doing like back-to-back and overlapping productions, directing and acting, and I was just ready for something different. So she was like, "Hey, this movie," but then I thought I'm gonna go get their attention first. So I decided to participate in this burlesque fundraiser they were doing. And I had a routine that I based on Lady Macbeth that I did to Baby Did a Bad Thing. And so, of course, I'm wearing like a little suit and I find some blood on the sleeve of my suit. So, of course, got to take the jacket off. And then, there's blood on the skirt too. Got to take that off.
Amazing,
and there's blood on every article of clothing. So I just got to take it all off. So that was my strategy in getting Chris's attention before then auditioning.
Yeah, we're great.
I was going to say, right? Yeah, successful. yeah.
Well, so and then she did a great audition. Obviously, she was cast. She was like the best person for the role. And then, but she was like, we didn't start dating till
It really was when we filmed all the hotel scenes that we really started spending serious time together. But that was like this magical week where it felt like we were all at summer camp. There was this hotel about an hour from where we live, and the manager just did not give a fuck. We were shooting like double decapitations in the parking lot. People scream all the time, like completely transformed one of the rooms, and we're doing all these kills in it. Like they just didn't care. And we all lived there for a week together. So it was just this like magical, like almost return to like college or camp that like,
that's so cool.
I think it's never going to match that. Yeah, it was incredible.
So yes, that's when we started hanging out romantically, and it was just one of those things where it's like I was trying not to develop feelings for Melissa because the circumstances. I didn't want to but I did. It was unavoidable.
No, but I love that story. It's like it's very romantic in a horror movie kind of way. Like I love that. I think what's interesting to me about it, and part of why I wanted to ask about it, is that it's like you started off as creative collaborators. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about you two in general is that that's continued. It's still very much a part of who you are as people, but I think also who you are in the public space, how you kind of support each other. Can you talk just a little bit about like how, like obviously there's some development of that and your personal relationship, obviously, but I feel like you both do a really wonderful job backing the other's moves. Is that something that has been intentional over the years? Like how did that kind of grow?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing we did creatively together was, besides Call Girl was like, we first were really more collaborative from a writing perspective was Vanishing Hitchhikers.
Yeah.
So we did and that's something I think we try to be encouraging of, like, if one of us really wants to do a project creatively, it's like, don't say, no, that's a bad idea. Like, yeah, if you're stoked about it, let's do it. So Melissa, at the time, this was like right when we first started dating, you were saying that you were like, you hadn't sang for a band or something. Yeah.
Yeah, in a while. Like I hadn't really like explored that avenue. I was like, it would be so cool to like write and record an album. And you were just like, yeah, let's do it.
And then I came up with the shtick of and we wrote the songs together. It was like, I was like, oh, I'd love to do like folk songs inspired by folklore, like urban legends. So that we wrote songs together and then recorded it. And that was actually for our wedding favor. That was we had CDs for all our wedding guests of the.
Oh, nice.
But no, I mean, it's like, it's a good, I mean, like, it's obviously not always easy. I think like creating with your partner, there's been definitely times where it's like, You have to be sensitive to things that matter that you wouldn't necessarily be sensitive to if there's just some guy you didn't care about,
I think both of us, because of our creative lives before we were together, we were both in the driver's seat a lot, When I was directing theater, it's like I was used to being like the person who made the decisions. And we were talking about this the other day, where I feel like theater and film are both collaborative, but I feel like theater is somehow like more collaborative. And I'm not sure even how to explain that. But I feel like with film, there's like this understanding of like the director is like the one, where I feel like in theater, it's like you have all your department heads. I think while film and theater are both collaborative, and I think some of this might be because my experience in theater has been with low budget theater, where like everyone has to wear a bunch of different hats and no one's really making any money off of it. So you want to make sure that everyone is creatively fulfilled, which is the same for the level of filmmaking that we do. But it just feels very collaborative in that you're really working as a team with your designers to create this vision. And I know as a director, I always wanted to make sure that everyone had their shining moments as far as, here's where we really see like where the costume design work went in, the set design work went in. And I don't know if it's the same with film, although having just directed my first feature, I also wanted to maintain that sense of ownership of all those departments. But I feel like in film, I think because you have that direction of like where you're having the audience look at all times, you have so much more control over that the director does need to play a stronger role, because all of those different departments are being put in a very specific frame in each moment.
With theater, and I've never directed theater, but this is just my dumb assessment of it. Once the director directs you, it's not like they're directing you mid-show, right? So like you almost like being a parent in this, and I'm not a parent either, so this is a really great analogy all around. I gave you these lessons, I gave you some now it's all you.
Yeah, well, it's funny too, because I've had directors in theater who have come and given notes in the middle of a run. And it's always just kind of like, what the hell are you doing, bro? Like,
like I even imagine
how this works.
But can you imagine that like during a live show? Like being like,
like during a show. No, I'm talking about like they come backstage like 2 weeks into a run and be like, that was great, but I have some notes. So you're like, that's not how theater works.
The train has left the station, pal.
Yeah. And it's like, that belongs to the stage manager and the actors now. Sorry, dude.
I feel like at any point in the process, a director during a movie can be like, I don't do that.
Yeah.
Or even at the end of the day, I think directing is a editor's medium. Film is an editor's medium, because like you can choose to cut out anything at any point.
Yeah.
Once it's in the can, which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got to that stuff, but yeah.
Well, we were starting to talk about just like how we work together, and it is not always easy, like you were saying, and you really do get lessons in what it means to not be too precious about things, or to recognize when your vulnerabilities are at stake more than like your actual ideas, where it's like criticism of an idea. It's like, am I married to this idea, or are my feelings just hurt? Because it's hard. It's really hard.
I went back to your feed late September, and just to quote you, 2 beautiful words, picture lock. And you kind of referenced before, like your directorial debut. How has that been, especially since, you've been talking about as a creative couple, as partners who are both creatively individually, but also in a partnership where you lean on each other's strengths, each other's creativity, and where you're working your 9 to 5. But then at 5:01 on a Friday, you're making that 4 or 5 hour commute somewhere because you have to be at Baltimore Comic-Con, or you're going somewhere to let people know about you, to kind of like, pimp your wares. Hey, you saw me at Baltimore Comic-Con. Then you go to WNF.bigcartel.com, and then you get on a mailing list. And then next time, hopefully they're checking out your projects. And I think, Melissa, like you're in that inertia. And then specifically in directing your first debut, how was that?
Oh, it was such a learning experience, and it was really scary a lot of the time, but it was so gratifying. And, like the team, our cast and crew were amazing. And I'm just so grateful for all the work that they did. And I'm really grateful to Chris, because Chris edited this, and, he wrote it, he co-wrote it with a buddy of ours. And I know that your editing process is usually like, I'm in charge now. Here's how I'm cutting this all together. And it was such a gift to have our process be such that I would make all of the selects. So I would review all the footage from all the scenes and color code everything with, hey, here's what I really want to use. Here's the stuff that I'm okay if we like need to use it. Here's the stuff that I don't even want you to look at. And I was really grateful because it gave over a lot of the control that you're used to having. And I know that had to be really challenging for you.
I didn't mind the edit process so much. Like, actually, that was great because you watched a lot of stuff I didn't have to watch. It saved me a lot of time. But I will say this, I think the process of editing this might be boring, like, talk for people who aren't filmmakers per se. But like, I will say this, I think I'm more of like a cut person. And with your theater background, you're like, let things breathe more. I was like, dude, I can't. Like, that's like, I don't know if that's what the audience wants. I don't know if the distributor wants that. Like, and at the same time too, like, I had to respect Melissa as director. And like, I mean, I think the movie is really great. It's just one of those things where I wouldn't have made all the same choices.
Yeah.
But I don't, it's just not my style.
Yeah. And I think it's just, committing to the style of the movie, which I don't even know how much we can talk about it yet. Nobody's been very clear.
No one has said what we can talk about, what the title is, the plot, who's funding it.
I'm sorry for being incredibly vague.
Yeah.
But the film has a particular style.
You could say it's a mockumentary.
It's a mockumentary.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, great.
It's a documentary. And I think there are certain features of documentary that I wanted to maintain. And some of that is, a sense of discovery where you don't know where a scene is going. And I wanted these things to feel like they were unfolding in real life and that you're actually like witness to events that are happening as they're happening. And for me, part of that language is to just like let a scene breathe and to let it feel more spontaneous, where I think if it were cut and snappy, fast, I think it loses a little of that style. And I'm glad. I mean, maybe, who knows? Maybe people will be like, what the fuck is this? Why is this so slow? But I'm glad that you were willing to
absolutely
entertain my stylistic choices.
I will tell you, working with Melissa wasn't as, for me, this part of the process was, I gotta be careful how I say this, was like getting notes from folks who weren't involved directly. And I know I know you guys like deal with that a lot of the time with like your jobs, like the animation job or just like working in marketing. It's like you get notes sometimes that you don't agree with, and you kind of have to be like, how do I throw this person a bone? How do I push back in a way that's respectful, but also says like, I'll be very clear. I'm quick to be like, fuck this on so many times people tell me what to do creatively.
There's a lot of ledges that I've talked to you. I'm not speaking specifically about this project, but there have been a few projects where Chris has just been like, fuck this, I don't want to do this anymore. Right? Like, we just need to you're just having feelings and we just need to kind of get through what is making you uncomfortable. And a lot of times I think the source of that discomfort is that you're not the one who's driving and you're not the one who's like in charge.
Yes, I think part of it is that this is a good conversation I feel like to have about being in a couple. Like, part of it is I'm not driving, but also part of it's like, if making art is my fun thing after the 9 to 5, keep it fun for me, please.
Yeah, for sure.
Please,
that's what's really. But I also think too, like, even the times when it wasn't fun for us collaborating was I never doubted the strategy in your decision or like things, but like why, like I understand, like, even if we fundamentally disagreed on something, like I still understood your rationale. Or sometimes I'm like, I don't understand what this person's rationale is. Like, are they giving give notes? Like,
where sometimes you can take comfort where you're like, okay, I don't agree with the solution, but their note makes sense. And you're like, okay, let me solve that. But like, I'm not going to take your half-assed idea.
Yeah.
During Melissa's directorial debut, that you ever felt like your comments or notes were more comments? You're like, I know I'm going to edit this, so this is kind of where I would like it to go, because you're thinking maybe more final product. Like, this is maybe what this scene is going to play out like. Did you find yourself making any adjustments on your end?
Yeah. And there were times too where I would even say to Chris, I'm deferring to you on
this cut.
This sequence that we're doing right now, because I know you are editing this. I know you have a vision of how this will work. And particularly because I was fresh to directing film. And so I want to make sure that I'm not like screwing you over when you sit down and edit, because there are gaps in my knowledge, you know? And I tried very, very much to like defer to the experts in the room. So like our directors of photography, I would ask a lot of questions. Like I didn't want to approach it and be like, well, I'm the director, so I obviously know everything that I'm doing. While meanwhile, I'm like sweating buckets.
But that's my strategy. I like to tell everyone I know.
Lead with the bluster. Lead with the bluster.
Hey, Gaffer, put that light in the trash can. That's where I want it.
I was going to ask Melissa, though. Melissa, did you feel like you had a little bit of a cheat code, though, having gone through a few of these productions? And I guess this is where, like, in some ways, I'm trying to separate you guys a little bit to be like, you're a partnership, but also creative partnership. Yes, this is how he cuts. This is how he works, but maybe separate from Chris. Like I've seen a production like this. I've worked with these people. I kind of have a little bit of an edge up on how this should go. So even though it's a debut, you're getting closer to those Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours because you're like, oh no, I've already got some in the bank. Like I'm good.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember when I made the transition just in general from working in theater to working in film with Call Girl. I started really noticing when I would be on a set, like with Chris or with other directors, I would just like notice like how people were doing things and then think about that with editing because I would ask you a lot of questions about editing. And I took an editing class from Chris.
Okay.
Like not even like a creepy, like just saying, like I had students. Yeah.
Public access station.
Yeah.
But I started then paying attention when I would watch movies and watch television because I knew editing was a thing, but I never really thought about the editing process or how much that can change the way a story is told. So I would start taking note of like, oh, I'm noticing like how this scene that I'm watching is edited and like the way that they're cutting back and forth or the way they're focusing on this and like really drawing your attention to this thing. So I feel like, like going into directing, I had a sense of like how everything is going to come together. But there were still those moments where I would just be kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I hope.
I mean, I think like Melissa's a way stronger actor director than I am. And I think she got some amazing performances. Like, and I think that exists out of her background as an actress, because I'm not an actor, even though we both act in this one.
Yeah.
But I feel like that, well, you'll see what our role is. Yeah. But I feel like it was kind of like designed for us to be a fun scene partners.
I feel like that too comes from, because my background is in not just like theater, but in writing and in editing writing. And so I think that makes me a strong director of performances too, because I at least have experience giving feedback about how people are communicating ideas. You know, I think that really feeds that too.
Yeah.
I have to imagine being, one of the writers or the co-writer of the film to kind of have that control. You give up the control for directing because Melissa, you're handling that, but then now you're back in control for editing. That's got to be like an interesting challenge as well.
It was actually very interesting in regard. Okay, so like here's an interesting thing about the movie. Okay, so it's a mockumentary. So the movie
it's Spinal Tap too, Chris. Just say it.
Yeah,
let's just
spoiler alert.
This was out.
Christopher Guest has been waiting this whole time. Come on, Chris. Or it's Fear of a Black Cat 2, something like that.
I will say this: if I've described WNUF as Christopher Guest making a horror movie, I feel like this is even more Christopher Guest making a horror movie, because it truly is more like a it's way more comedy horror than horror comedy. And so I read a draft years ago, and then and this is why I think our lead actress, I think, is very much how I imagine the character, like fully on. Because I think when we did the polished draft, there was a couple things. One, I sort of I knew we were going to cast this person if she could do it, right? So we started writing for what she had previously done some of our other films, and then Melissa gave great notes about just the dialogue, but we did a whole voice pass. But what was interesting was there were certain characters I didn't imagine them saying that line that way or have it read that way, but none of them were things that were untrue to the character. It was just I would have played that for a different punch or something like that, but they still it still work. It's just different. That's what was really crazy, because it's once a movie is made 3 times, right? When you write it, when you shoot it, when you edit it. And I feel like being involved very closely with being involved in the writing and the editing, but being around on set during the production, there were only a couple times where I would be I don't know if I would have, and I don't even know if I told Melissa, I don't know if I do it that way, because I tried to be incredibly respectful as much as I could of her role as director and not give notes, especially in front of other crew people or anything like that. But yeah. But it was weird. It It was super weird. I mean, like, I will tell you this script, and one of the reasons I think why Melissa ended up directing it was like, I didn't want to direct it, right? Like, I was like, I want to sell a screenplay. And like, the company was sort of like, well, we want to make this movie. And like, I was like, well, Melissa could obviously direct this. So like, and she did a better job than I would have.
Do you think this is a good, like, starting point because you've not had someone else direct any of your work before?
No, and I thought you were very gentle.
Well, that's okay. I wonder if you had just sold the screenplay and some other person had directed it, would that be really shocking and really hard? Whereas, is this a good, like, baby steps where, okay, it's someone who I know I trust, I hope. I hope you trust that you also can talk to.
Yes.
But like, it's like one step closer to having to watch your work be interpreted by someone else on the screen.
Well, so what I think is really interesting in the hands of and I think it's why your strength is it's so funny. This just feel like an ass kissing session. It's a weird.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
We can retitle the podcast for just this episode.
I'm just gonna put those little smoochy sound effects in the whole time.
No, but like, okay. Let me just be very blunt. When I wrote the script, I wrote 3 scripts in 3 months, like in 2017, because I was like, I just want to have scripts lying around, right? And in the middle of writing this script, I lost my job. And the theme of this movie, God, it's so great that we can't even talk about what this movie is. Maybe we can. I want to, but
I don't know.
We won't.
We should have asked.
Okay. We'll talk to her soon.
We can circle back. We can circle back in a different episode.
But I can explain this. So basically this third one, I lost my job. I got laid off over the phone while we were on vacation in the process of writing this one, right? And this one is all about finding where you belong. That's the theme of the movie is finding where you belong. And table that because I feel like I blew through that script. It's like, I just want to finish this script in a month because I made my promise of myself. I'm going to do this. So basically what ended up happening was a couple years later, I was like, I still think that's a really fun script. I had sent some scripts to this production company that was trying to produce like some like $30K budget movies. And I was like, I got the script. I'm not going to rewrite it for my tiny bit of a $30K budget, but like, see if you guys can do it. And this production company who was there at the time was like, our in-house like screenwriting guy like thinks this is like the best script he's gotten submit for this budget range. So basically at that point I was like, well, yeah, cool, take it, do it. And I don't think I would have cared about that script, right? And at some point around that point, my buddy Rob Walker ended up doing Punch Up with me, a little bit of comedy Punch Up on it. But then what ended up happening with Rob's Punch Up in the process of getting someone to give us a little bit more money than what was initially outlined. And like Melissa gave notes on the story about the character. I did another draft where I polished it up even further and tightened it up for our budget because the movie was clearly too expensive for both budgets, I should say. What ended up happening was I went from not caring about this because if somebody would have made it for $30,000, I'd been like, cool, have fun. Like I'll take whatever measly paycheck of that is there. And then it'd be my goal to sell a screenplay. Watching Melissa have to become a producer on it and like truly, like when I say producer, like a unit production manager, like producing, but at every part of the process, and me trying to do that while subsequently in my full-time job, we had significant layoffs. So I was unable to provide as much producing support as I typically would do in one of my films because of like career stuff. And when she started working on the movie so hard and watching how many favors we called in from friends and like people that we thought were insanely talented that were working for a sliver of their usual day rates in the professional scope, I started caring about the movie a lot more. Being the director, I knew you cared a lot more. Whereas like, I think if we had sold the movie to the folks early on that were like talking about like a $30K budget, I think it would have been so work for hirey. I couldn't have cared, but I cared way more because you were emotionally invested in it.
Yeah.
Don't check your dial, folks. You didn't tune into Transylvania's public access station. No, sir. Tonight is Halloween.
Halloween is Satan's night, the night of the devil.
Reporter Frank Stewart has a special Halloween treat in store for viewers tonight. He'll be leading a group of paranormal experts through the infamous Weber House.
Do you know what happened here in the Weber House? Some people got killed. Their son went haywire.
Frank Stewart and his team of experts will conduct the first ever live on TV seance.
Evil works in mysterious ways, Frank. It's unpredictable.
Are there any spirits in the house?
It's scary.
That's far out.
That far out.
Something strange going on in this house. Animal mutilation, paranormal disturbances, devil worship. Wait, whoa, hold on. This is not staged. Hello?
Is this the work of the devil?
Folks, we are going where no camera crew has gone before. Father, perform the exorcism. This is not some Halloween prank. The grisly evidence of the supernatural is real. We'll be right back.
You're watching the WNUF Halloween Special.
I think especially in watching WNUF with Pete for the first time, there's a specificity to it where you were able to delve into like the shared memory we have about those commercials, about the vibe, about the feel. I remember that trucking commercial for the trucking school, or I remember a Super Soaker commercial like that. Sunday. I'm like, yeah, Pete and I saw the version of that commercial in our respective like regions in our areas, just like a lot of people are like, yeah, no, I remember that, but they're based on like the shared memory. And I'm wondering if going from that, where in some ways talk about like maybe a cheat code, you had a cheat code because you were going to very specific memories that you and I and you and Pete and you and Josh, all of us happen to share, right? But then you're going to comedy. I mean, that's like playing the game on hard mode. Very difficult because now you can't cheat.
I don't know if I'm necessarily as naturally funny as I think I am or as I'd like to be. And I think the actors
for those who can't see this,
the shoulder.
Melissa is patting this shoulder.
Very comforting. But I will say, I think Melissa made things really funny. I think the casting choices like we made were really, really funny and really elevated some scenes, got jokes that I didn't expect to get. And Rob Walker's like insanely funny.
So funny.
Like Rob is just like, I mean, hopefully if Rob listens to this, he knows how valued he is as some of the restructuring did for some of the later drafts of the story. He just elevates the humor very much. But it's weird, like comedy. When I wrote movies early on, I tried to make dialogue that would be like, I don't know what the term would be. I wouldn't call it idiot proof because that's not the case, but that would like play even if a performance didn't.
Yes, performance proof.
Yeah. And like try really hard to do that. Like I feel like the funnier comedy gets, it has to be actor specific. And I think that's why you were great in that, in getting those jokes out of people.
Particularly when you're dealing with stuff that's really character based, like something like this, like, yeah, it has to be very specific and it has to feel very real for the character.
Yeah.
There's some stuff that I think you've done in the past that works for those movies. And I think is smart because you never know, like, are you going to get 2 people audition for this role? Or are you going to get 30 people audition for this role? And you have to write it for that former scenario, you know? And I think we had some freedom with this project because we could trust actors. We used a lot of theater actors too. Yeah. And the people who are used to like really, truly building a character that feels very real and very spontaneous. And I think that elevates the comedy too, because it all feels like real for that character. Even if that person is ridiculous, they don't know they're ridiculous.
Yeah. It does feel like sometimes too, when you're structuring things like that, it's like you've got your eye on, you got a lot of different plates you're spinning and you're thinking about structure, you're thinking about the story, you're thinking about choices. And, the idea, Melissa, of you coming at it from a character instinct, from a performance instinct, it's like, especially in a mockumentary format, it's like, you want that authenticity, a different kind of authenticity than, you got in WNUF or mixtape. Different needs, right? These things have different needs, but that authenticity kind of remains the same. Yeah. Which is an awkward segue because I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Amanda the Adventurer.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Wooly.
Can I share a secret with you?
Do you trust me?
Oh no! Wooly had an accident!
Amanda!
No! We saw so many things today!
Melissa, I would love to hear, because there's an authenticity in the world of the kind of fake TV show that's a part of the game. If you could take a sec and kind of pitch that to folks just so they know where they can get it and play it. I thought it was really creepy and super effective. But I would also love to hear how kind of that came about and the writing process for that.
Yeah, cool. Well, first of all, thank you very much. So Amanda the Adventurer is an analog horror game that is on PC via Steam and is on Nintendo Switch now. Basically, it takes place in an attic where you, as the character Riley, find some VHS tapes. So working within that sort of like analog sensibility of stuff that was taped in like the early 2000s off of television, but it starts interacting with you. So these characters that you think you're just watching on these tapes start not only interacting with you, but changing their behavior based on what you do. So you can return to tapes that change. If you do something in the attic, you'll return to a tape that you formerly encountered, and stuff will be different in that.
Something new has happened. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So basically, like the way that I tell people the short version is like, okay, you know, Dora the Explorer. Well, what if that was really fucked up? Like that's
what if it wasn't good for kids to watch?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically the way that Amanda the Adventurer started is that Dread XP was doing these game jams. And so I wasn't involved at that stage of it, but they would basically give developers 2 weeks to create a game based around a theme. So the theme for that was analog horror. So this team of developers out of Canada, they're called Mangled Maw, created Amanda the Adventurer for that. Dread XP loved it and decided to fund it for a full-length game.
Wow.
So Chris had done some trailer work for Dread XP, and so they hit him up about doing some video stuff for Amanda the Adventurer, which we subsequently co-produced and co-directed. Nice. But they also mentioned they were looking for a writer. So he said, well, my wife's a writer, and she was basically a creative director. I was director of product development at Hunt a Killer, which was basically a creative director and many other hats type role. So I talked to the guys, ended up having this wild conversation with James Pratt at Mangled Maw, who's the lead developer on the project, where we just went down this rabbit hole of like Elsa Gate and YouTube and all this stuff, like changing YouTube's rules about like what you can show kids and how you can't comment on stuff that's meant for kids and all this other stuff. So we ended up having this like 45-minute conversation right off the bat. And I think that's probably when he was like, yes, I think Melissa is the right person to write this. If like,
nice.
We're suddenly, chatting Elsa Gate within moments of meeting each other. Thinking more about those kind of topics, but then also watching and consuming other things that play off of that, like children's entertainment. But what if it's wrong somehow? Like familiar? Oh God, no! Like what is happening? Pulls an old switcheroo on you. And yeah, beyond that, like Mangled Maw just gave me like a huge sandbox. They were basically like, we obviously want to keep Amanda because it's called Amanda the Adventurer and her friend Wooly, who is her sidekick. But other than that, do whatever you want with it.
Wow.
It was an amazing gift. So I pitched them 3 different pieces, of lore. They picked the one that they liked the best. And then I wrote like 7-page lore document because I want to make sure that if this story goes farther, that we always have something to return to. So that's where I started. I started with creating lore that you probably see less than 10% of, but I know that this is the truth that we can always go back to. So that there's never any, like, if there's a sequel that we're like, wait, why does that happen? And we just have to pull something out of our ass, it's like, no, here it is. We always knew that this was part of it.
There's like a master doc. There's like,
Exactly.
Yeah, show Bible.
It's like the Bible.
Basically
the
show Bible. Yeah. The way the game is set up is that we're watching these tapes and they have these very Dora adjacent setups. There's a thing, you've got to make choices. Each one is kind of different. They each progress and get creepier every time. Super into it. It was rad. But what, like, I'm curious about, like, how do you, it's like a branching narrative. So like versus like the way you maybe wrote like your, it listens from the radio episode 3, Burning Calories, for those who are interested. Also co-starring Fina Sanchez, who's a mutual friend.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, Fina did a voice on Onyx Equinox that I was a writer for, and she's a goddess. She's amazing. But like the branching narrative conceptually is like, that's a different approach. How did you wrap your head around that work, that scene work?
Yeah, so I wrote it in such a way that first I pitched a bunch of episodes. So I thought about like what are kind of episode topics that like Sesame Street or Dora the Explorer might get into. Things around your neighborhood, things around the house, but then, yeah, like you said, like progressively getting weirder, which was where the real fun happened. So I was like, okay, we start with In the Kitchen and we end up with an episode titled Everything Rots, and so I wanted to stay within the realm of like what feels comfortable, but then you're like, wait a minute, everything what? Like those sort of like fact-based sorts of things. So I started with episode outlines of like, okay, here are things that would normally be in those kind of episodes. Now, what if it starts getting freaky? What might a character who's a little unhinged in one of those do? Then we layered in the branching elements of it and decided. So James really took the lead on the puzzle development. So you watch a tape, you interact with the tape, but then you have to go do something out in the attic. So James has a lot of that. Like we talked about like ways that those might play out, but that was really primarily his role. So we worked together with how the tapes and the attic interplay. And so we would decide like, okay, it'd be cool if like tape 3 we come back to as tape 8. So the challenge for me then was like, how do I not blow my load on all of the weird shit in tape 3 and like save some of that for when we come back to it, And then also in an overarching sense, like what's too weird too fast? Because I wanted it to be a really slow burn where even in episode 1, you get a couple of weird things. Like, why is this little girl like telling kids how to use a knife? That's not right, but it's not too weird. It's just like a bad decision, but not a sinister decision.
Well, it's like that withholding, and then you're like remixing yourself when 3 becomes 8 again.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
There were some really interesting experiences that felt very meta during the production of this movie too. Not movie, game. Sorry, brain. We should talk about the story. My niece was supposed to be. There's a secret tape, like the live action segments that we co-directed. Like, there's this scene where these two parents, I play the dad, you're the voice of the mom and operating the camera, and you see a little girl watching Amanda on the TV set. And initially it was supposed to be my niece. And when we sat her down, like literally we started rolling on the first take of this, or a walkthrough maybe, she saw that what was on the screen.
And she freaked out. She was like, no, I've seen this on YouTube. I don't want to do this. So she was crying, was not into it.
Yeah.
So we ended up having to call, like we were posting on Facebook because we're like, we've got this all set up. Like, this video.
Yeah, like set decorated the whole place with like early 2000s. Yeah.
So we put out a call on Facebook. We're like calling everyone we know who has kids. And a friend of mine I've been friends with since I was 10 years old, her daughter, who was an alien for us and out there. Yeah, so we called her, and her daughter does these like ninja competitions. She's insane. She's
she's like 10?
Yeah. So we call, and she's like, we're in Pennsylvania, but we'll be there as soon as we can. They were at a competition.
But it's crazy to me that like my niece didn't, like, she recognized Amanda from, I guess,
from YouTube,
from these like weird little videos based off the Game Jam.
And then like videos that people do where they'll like take stuff from Amanda and like run with it and like turn it even creepier.
Well, and that's what's crazy to me. I mean, I think about times like when I was a kid and I would just see like a horror movie trailer, like a 30-second in theaters now, and I'd be terrified. And that's the only thing I would have saw.
Yeah.
That's the type of stuff that kids online are seeing now and being like that. That's essentially the equivalent of like going like this when you walk past the horror section because you don't want to look at that in the box.
Yeah.
It's like wild.
Well, their brains probably fill in. Like they're just getting such a small
definitely.
Their brains fill in the details. It's like the whole thing with like not showing the monster.
Yeah.
Because whatever's in your head is scarier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing that was funny about this game too, I thought was just weird, is just like we're just not video game people, right? Like, I mean, why don't
time?
Yeah. You just have time to write them.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, we had this moment where our buddy Joe, he's a security guard in one of the cutscenes that we produced, and I guess like a week or so after the game came out, he teaches in close to Baltimore where we are, and one of his students was whispering, he's like, "Yo, Mr. Mitra, he looks like the security guard in Amanda the Adventurer." And Joe was like, "What?" Yeah. And that was at this moment where like, this video game is like way more popular than we had any idea like about. It's weird crazy stuff.
Well, like I went to post a video when we went to Hot Topic to look at the shirts. And I got on TikTok to post this video and I like started putting in the hashtag Amanda the Adventure. 1.6 billion views. And I'm like, what?
It's crazy. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's insane. It's just like crazy to think too that like that's probably the biggest thing that I'm ever gonna do. I guess time will tell, but it's also crazy to think like how relatively anonymous my role in it is. You know? Like you don't think about like video game writers the same way you think about like a film director or even a film a screenwriter.
Yeah. Well, I think that's interesting too. It's like a lot of this stuff, even the WNUF movies, I mean, they don't have credits.
Yeah.
You know, and all those things, it's like, it's, I mean, I think I did that because we wanted to commit to the bit, but it's like one of those things now, it's like, that probably would have been helpful in my career a little bit. But no, I mean, I think it's true. Like, but also I think it's really cool when you think about it like that, when you think about the folklore of something, or maybe that's not the word, but like the story ecosystem, it's like, I don't know, it's very immersive in that regard, you know?
Yeah.
Do you feel, Melissa, having not really known that the impact that the game had prior to being involved with, do you think that would have changed your, tackling it? Like if you had like that weight of something that you're like, oh, this is a lot bigger than I thought. Like now I have to like do that justice. Or do you think you maybe like were helped by the fact that you went in a little bit blind?
Well, honestly, I had a feeling it was going to be really big just because I had seen a response to the shorter version, the proof of concept version that they did for the Game Jam, because that had gotten so much attention. And there were all these playthroughs, like there were playthroughs of that on YouTube that had like 1 million views or something. And so that was one of those conversations that I alluded to earlier, where at one point Chris was kind of like, I'm just so stressed out with work. Like, I don't even really want to work on this right now, when we were working on the live action. And I was just kind of like, I think this is going to be a big thing. Like you need to power through this.
Well, I think that was even before. I don't know, like the live action stuff. Like, I mean, even the writing of it, I was like, I remember being like, if you just want to do like if you
that's why I knew. Originally we were going to co-write the live action,
but there's no way I could have done it.
So I ended up writing all of those too, which I think helped because like I was so married to all of the lore anyway that I feel like having to like then catch you up and kick back and forth ideas, and for me to be like, well, actually in 1997 this happens, you know.
But that's what did happen when we figured out the cutscenes, because it was like, which ones can we do based off their budget and based off of what we want to tell story wise. I remember pitching things to you and be like, that's not how that works. And I'd be like, excuse me. But that's true. I mean, that was the game. But that also, like the writing, I think, like, I don't know when that was like you were writing that, after the WNF2 tour or during it? It was crazy. I mean, that's the thing too. It's like, it's kind of nuts to think about. Like, somebody called me a workaholic recently, and I was like, I'm not a workaholic. Like, and I was thinking to myself, like, I was like, oh my God, no, we literally end our full-time jobs, then come home and work like assholes on this other stuff.
So many times we're just like, don't you wish you could just like be a normal person?
We're all in the same boat, I think, in this podcast.
I was going to say, Melissa, but even if you could you turn it off?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I wish I could be like just a person who's just like, what's on TV tonight? You know, like that I could fully be that person.
Why does that seem so foreign? I don't know.
It's so alien. Because we really torture ourselves.
I mean, I enjoy it, but
I truly do. But it is, it's exhausting. And then sometimes I am like, on my deathbed, will I be like, man, I really wish I'd spent more time with the people I love.
No, I think about that.
Hey, that's a great note to end on. I think we can just wrap on that.
I'm gonna go everyone out there spend more time with them.
Turn off the podcast.